was supposed to be a routine flight from Dallas to Portland, business class. Quiet morning. But for Kendra Hollis, a black woman CEO with decades of leadership behind her, those first moments on Flight AV 2415 became something no one could have imagined. How does a seat you paid for suddenly belong to someone else? What happens when policy becomes an excuse for prejudice? And what if the person they underestimate is the one who can bring an entire system to its knees? From whispered instructions in the galley, to a confrontation that froze an entire cabin, to whistleblowers who risked their careers. This is the true story of what happened before the plane ever left the ground. A story about dignity, about standing still until the exact moment you decide to move, and about the power of one person to spark change in a billion-dollar industry. If you believe respect is non-negotiable, if you've ever wondered how far one act of courage can go, stay with us. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because what you're about to hear will stay with you long after the seatbelt sign turns off. The boarding line for AeroVista Flight AV 2415 moved in that slow, uneven rhythm every frequent flyer knew. Luggage wheels rattled over the jet bridge. The air was thick with recycled terminal scent coffee, perfume, and the faint tang of disinfectant. Kendra Hollis stepped through the doorway into the warm glow of the business class cabin. She had been on enough flights to recognize the subtle differences between airlines, and AeroVista's cabins always had that signature eucalyptus note in the air. She liked it. It made the space feel less like transit and more like arrival. She glanced down at her boarding pass, though she didn't need to. Seat 2A, window, a small luxury on a 2.5-hour hop from Dallas to Portland. She carried no rolling bag, only a soft leather briefcase in one hand and a folded coat over her arm. She slid the briefcase under the seat, placed her coat on the armrest, and began settling in. That was when the shadow fell over her shoulder. "That's my seat." The voice was deep, flat, with a hint of impatience as if the matter was already settled. Kendra turned. The man standing there was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a sport coat over a polo shirt, his travel tag still dangling from the handle of his carry-on. His face was sunburned, and his eyes had that expectant glint of someone used to get in his way. "2A," he repeated. "Bradley Sloan. Check your ticket." She kept her tone even. "It's correct. 2A. Kendra Hollis." He chuckled not warmly. "Must be a mix-up. Let me see." He extended a hand as though she might pass him her boarding pass for inspection. She didn't move. The crew can verify. The aisle began to bottleneck as passengers waited to get by. Somewhere behind, a young woman muttered an apology as she squeezed past, phone in hand. She found an open seat in the next row, and Kendra noticed the tiny red dot on the phone screen. Recording. A flight attendant appeared blonde, hair pulled into a bun, crisp uniform. "Is there a problem here?" Bradley leaned toward her with the confident body language of someone certain he would be believed. "Yeah, I'm in 2A, but she's sitting here." The attendant glanced at Kendra, then back at Bradley. "Sir, I'll check the manifest." "Ma'am, if you could just step into the aisle for a moment, I'd rather not." Kendra said, polite but firm, "This is my assigned seat." The attendant's tone tightened. "Non-compliance can delay our departure." Kendra could feel the shift in the air. Passengers up and down the aisle were watching now, some curious, some impatient, some with that uncomfortable look that said they'd seen this scene before. Bradley folded his arms. I've been flying AeroVista for 15 years. Never had this problem. From 2 rows back, the young woman with the phone adjusted her camera, angling it so both Kendra and Bradley were in frame. The faint sound of live comments pinging through earbuds reached Kendra's ears. She kept her eyes on the attendant. Please verify with the gate records. My boarding pass was scanned at E17. The attendant hesitated, then murmured something into her radio. Another voice entered the mix, a deeper, authoritative one. What seems to be the issue, Captain Owen Travers stood in the aisle, hat in hand, his epaulets catching the light. His presence drew an immediate hush from the nearby passengers. Mr. Sloan says there's a seating conflict, the attendant reported. Owen turned first to Bradley. Sir, let me see your boarding pass. Then to Kendra. Ma'am, yours as well. Both passes showed 2A. That's odd, Owen said. It's possible there was a duplicate assignment. Ma'am, perhaps we can move you to another seat so we can sort this out quickly. Kendra heard the soft buzz of her phone in her coat pocket. A calendar alert for a board prep call she was due to lead in Portland. Time mattered, but so did this moment. She thought of her father, teaching her at 15 how to respond when the world decided you didn't belong somewhere. Don't flinch, he had said. Stillness is a kind of power. Bradley shifted his weight, a faint smirk on his face as if the outcome was already inevitable. Kendra breathed in. Let the silence stretch. Captain, she said finally, I'm staying in my assigned seat. Owen's jaw tightened. Ma'am, I need you to cooperate so we can avoid a delay. She reached down, unlatched the brass clasp on her briefcase. The movement was unhurried, deliberate. She slid out a folder, its top sheet stamped with the AeroVista logo in bold navy ink. She didn't hand it over, not yet. Around her, the cabin seemed to lean closer. The hum of the air vents filled the pause. Zoe, the young woman with the phone, whispered to her live stream audience. Something's about to happen. Kendra looked from the captain to the attendant, then to Bradley. Her voice stayed calm. Before you decide who leaves this seat, you might want to read this. The paper rested lightly between her fingers, but the weight in the air had shifted. Whatever came next would decide more than where she sat for the next 2 hours. And somewhere, deep in the quiet space she kept for herself, Kendra could feel it the moment her father had prepared her for, the one where you choose whether to stand up or stay seated. The captain's eyes flicked from the paper in Kendra's hand to her face. He didn't reach for it, not yet. The narrow aisle seemed to shrink as the boarding passengers piled up behind Bradley, forced to wait for this standoff to resolve. Somewhere in the back, an impatient sigh carried over the low murmur of voices. Madeline Keene shifted from one foot to the other. Her smile, polite and thin, had begun to fray at the edges. Ma'am, if you could just step aside into the aisle while the captain and I confirm the seat assignments. Kendra didn't move. My boarding pass was scanned. My seat was issued to me at the gate. Moving would suggest I accept that I don't belong here. Bradley let out a small, amused exhale. Oh, come on. It's just a seat. Don't make it a big thing. Zoe Park Ortiz's phone angled higher, capturing Kendra's expression. The live-stream chat was moving so fast now that Zoe could barely read it, but she saw enough comments about typical treatment, others urging Kendra to stand her ground, a few calling for the crew to intervene in her favor. Captain Owen Travers cleared his throat. Mr. Sloan, please step back toward the galley. I'll resolve this quickly. He turned to Kendra. Ma'am, we're under a time constraint. We can place you in another business class seat for this flight." Kendra's mind flicked back to a December evening when she was 17, standing in a department store near the perfume counter. A manager had accused her of stealing a scarf she hadn't even touched. The humiliation had been sharp and cold, made worse by the way other shoppers averted their eyes. No one had spoken for her then, not today. She slid the document forward. "You should read this before you decide anything." Owen took the paper reluctantly. His eyes scanned the letterhead, the signature at the bottom. Madeline leaned over to glance at it, but he shifted it slightly out of her view. His jaw worked as he read. Bradley's voice cut in. "Whatever she's waving around, it doesn't change the fact that my name's on the manifest for 2A. You're welcome to confirm that with the gate," Kendra replied. "But first, confirm who I am." Owen folded the paper slowly, almost thoughtfully. "Ms. Hollis, would you be willing to step to the galley so we can discuss this privately?" She looked at him for a long beat, weighing the request. "If we go, I want an independent witness present, and I'm not relinquishing my claim to this seat." From behind them, a man in a hoodie cleared his throat. "I can be that witness." He offered, "Name's Mark. I'm in 3B. His voice had that dry, unimpressed edge of someone who'd seen enough nonsense for one day. Owen's lips thinned, but he didn't refuse. "Fine. Mr. Sloan, please find your assigned seat in the meantime." Bradley didn't move. "So she gets special treatment because she's, what, important?" He gestured vaguely toward her. "This is ridiculous." Zoe's voice carried from her seat. "Maybe it's because she's being treated like she doesn't belong in a seat she paid for. And the internet's watching." A ripple went through the nearby rows. People were paying closer attention now, not just to the scene, but to Zoe's phone, glowing brightly with the ongoing stream. Bradley glanced at it, a flicker of unease crossing his face. Owen led the way toward the front galley. Kendra followed, her steps even. Mark trailed behind, hands in pockets. Madeline came last, her radio clipped to her waistband. In the galley, the hum of the aircraft was louder, more mechanical. The narrow counter space was stacked with catering trays and folded service cards. Owen handed the paper to Madeline. She read it, her eyes widening slightly as she reached the end. "This is from the AeroVista Executive Advisory Board," she said. "Correct?" Kendra replied. "And my firm is a significant shareholder in this airline. That document confirms both." Owen crossed his arms. "Why didn't you identify yourself sooner? Because my identity shouldn't determine whether I'm treated with basic respect," Kendra said. "But when you asked me to give up my seat without verifying the facts, I realized you weren't going to change course unless you knew who you were speaking to." Madeline shifted uncomfortably. It was a tight boarding. We were trying to avoid a delay, at the expense of fairness, Kendra said softly. Mark leaned against the bulkhead. "From my row, it looked like you believed him over her before you even checked." Owen's eyes flicked to Mark, then back to Kendra. "This isn't the place for a policy debate. It is exactly the place," Kendra countered, "and exactly the time. Because if it's happening to me, it's happening to other passengers probably without an ounce of the leverage I have." Bradley's voice interrupted from the aisle. "Are we done yet? Some of us have meetings to get to." Kendra turned her head toward him, her voice level. "So do I." Owen sighed. "Ms. Hollis, Mr. Sloan, please give me 5 minutes to consult with ground operations." He stepped into the cockpit, leaving Madeline, Mark, and Kendra in the galley. Zoe had followed as far as the curtain and was still streaming, the glow of her phone like a small spotlight in the dim front of the cabin. Kendra's thoughts turned inward. She could feel the familiar tug of war inside her, the part that wanted to de-escalate, get to Portland, finish her workday, versus the part that knew moments like this were why change either happened or didn't. She could walk away and still make her meeting. She could avoid the headlines. But what about the next woman asked to stand up, to step aside, to yield, because someone else's word carried more weight? Her father's voice again, steady in memory. Don't pick every battle, but when you pick one, win it. The curtain rustled. Owen reappeared, holding 2 new boarding passes. He handed one to Bradley. "Mr. Sloan, you've been reassigned to 4C. Bradley stared at the pass. "That's economy. Extended legroom," Owen said evenly. "A complimentary drink will be provided." Bradley's mouth opened, then shut. His gaze darted to Zoe's phone, still aimed in his direction. Without another word, he turned and rolled his bag down the aisle. Owen faced Kendra. "Your seat is confirmed as 2A. Ground operations apologized for the duplicate assignment." Kendra inclined her head. "Thank you." Madeline cleared her throat. "Ma'am, if you'll take your seat, we'll be ready to push back." As Kendra stepped back into the cabin, she caught sight of Zoe, who lowered her phone slightly but kept recording. The younger woman gave a small nod, as if to say, "I saw it all." Kendra returned it. The hum of voices in the cabin shifted to a quieter, more watchful tone. People tracked her movement down the aisle, past the rows of faces, some approving, some curious, a few deliberately blank. She sat, fastened her belt, and placed the briefcase back under the seat. Through the corner of her eye, she saw Zoe typing rapidly on her phone. Somewhere out there, the footage was already being uploaded, shared, dissected. She knew what came next: questions, statements, maybe a call from AeroVista's leadership. She would be ready. Kendra glanced toward the front of the cabin, where Owen was speaking into his radio. Maddie was checking overhead bins, her expression tight. This wasn't over. Not here, not in the air, not after landing, and deep down, she felt the calm certainty of a storm building. The plane pushed back from the gate, engines rumbling to life, a mechanical shudder traveled through the fuselage, and the air vents hummed louder. Kendra sat still, hands folded loosely in her lap, eyes on the safety demonstration that she could have recited from memory. Across the aisle in 2C, a man in a crisp business suit kept glancing at her, then at Zoe behind him, whose phone was still in hand. Zoe had angled the camera downward now, pretending to scroll, but Kendra could tell the younger woman was quietly documenting the aftermath. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been given clearance for departure. Flight time to Portland will be approximately 2 hours and 27 minutes. Please remain seated as we taxi to the runway." Kendra let the words wash over her without meaning. Her mind was already moving ahead beyond this flight, beyond Portland, to the phone calls and questions she knew would follow. She had been here before, not in a cabin seat, but in boardrooms where her authority was questioned in quieter, more insidious ways. And every time, she had learned that dignity was a weapon if wielded steadily enough. The plane rolled, turned, and paused in line for takeoff. Bradley sat 3 rows back now, in the extended legroom section. She could feel his gaze even without looking. She wondered if he was rehearsing his version of events, or simply stewing at the demotion and seating. Beside him, a mother was calming a restless toddler. The contrast made Kendra's chest tighten, not with anger, but with a weary kind of clarity. The stakes of this kind of treatment were not just about inconvenience. They were about the quiet message it sent, the seed it planted in people's minds about who belonged where. The engines roared. The cabin tilted back as the plane surged forward, wheels clattering over the runway seams before lifting free of the ground. That moment of weightlessness passed quickly into the steady climb. Kendra adjusted her seatbelt and turned slightly toward the window. Dallas spread out below in neat grids, the morning light catching on rooftops and highways. For a brief moment, the view almost pushed away the tension of the last 30 minutes. But then she heard the faint, unmistakable sound of a camera shutter from somewhere behind. It wasn't Zoe, this was closer, and it was followed by the low murmur of two voices. She caught fragments. She's the one. Yeah, from the live stream. Kendra inhaled slowly. Public attention was a double-edged sword. It could amplify truth, but it could also distort it beyond recognition. She had seen both. She closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself in that pocket of calm she had learned to protect. A chime signaled the seatbelt sign turning off. Maddie moved down the aisle with a practiced smile, offering drinks. When she reached Kendra, her voice was softer than before. "Would you like something? Ms. Hollis water, please," as Maddie poured from the bottle into a plastic cup. She hesitated. "For what it's worth. I'm sorry about earlier." Kendra met her gaze. "Thank you. But this isn't about me alone." Maddie nodded once, as if she understood more than she could say, and moved on. From the corner of her eye, Kendra saw Zoe rise from her seat, phone still in hand, and approach the galley. The two women exchanged a brief glance as Zoe passed a silent check-in, a signal that the story wasn't going away. Minutes later, Zoe returned, slipping into her seat with a look that was equal parts adrenaline and disbelief. She leaned forward toward Kendra. Voice low, "The comments are blowing up. People are tagging news outlets." Kendra kept her expression neutral, though inside she felt that steady click of inevitability. "Be careful," she said quietly. "Not all attention is safe." The announcement tone pinged again. This time, Owen's voice came through, steady but carrying a faint edge. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been instructed to hold at our current altitude due to weather systems near Portland. We'll keep you informed as we have updates." It was an ordinary operational announcement. But Kendra heard something else beneath it, a tension in his delivery that hadn't been there before. 10 minutes later, as she sipped her water, Maddie returned, leaning down discreetly. "Captain Travers would like to speak with you again. He says it's important." Kendra set the cup down. "Now, yes, ma'am. He's in the cockpit." Zoe's eyes widened as Kendra rose, slipping her briefcase strap over her shoulder. Passengers tracked her movement again, their expressions a mix of curiosity and speculation. In the cockpit, Owen gestured to the co-pilot's seat. "Please, sit." Kendra lowered herself into the seat, noting the flicker of clouds in the windscreen. Owen closed the door behind them. "We received a message from ground control," he began. "AeroVista's corporate office is aware of what happened before departure. They've instructed me to convey their apologies and ask if you'd be willing to meet with them upon landing." Kendra studied him. "Is this a request?" or a summons A request? Owen said carefully, but I think you know it will carry weight either way. She considered her answer. This was moving faster than she had anticipated. I'll meet with them, but it will be on my terms. Owen inclined his head. Understood. As she rose to leave, he added, For what it's worth, I regret how it unfolded. We were under pressure to depart. Kendra paused at the door. Pressure isn't an excuse for failing to see someone standing right in front of you. Back in her seat, she fastened the belt again. Zoe leaned over. That looked serious. What happened? They want a meeting in Portland, Kendra said simply. Zoe's brows lifted. This is going to be huge. Kendra didn't reply. Her mind was already mapping the conversation to come. The weight of it pressed against her chest, not fear, but the awareness that every word she spoke could ripple far beyond this flight. She looked out the window again. The clouds were thickening ahead, streaked with gray. The plane would land in a city that didn't yet know what was coming. But the first drops of change were already falling. The clouds outside had thickened to a solid wall of gray, the kind that blurred horizon lines and made the aircraft feel like it was floating inside a tunnel. The seatbelt sign pinged on again, and Maddie's voice followed with a gentle reminder to remain seated. Kendra sat still, eyes forward, listening to the quiet shuffle of passengers adjusting in their seats. The cabin had settled into that uneasy equilibrium after a confrontation. People weren't openly talking about it anymore, but the energy hadn't dissipated. It was the kind of silence where eyes still flicked sideways, and the memory of what had happened hummed under the surface. Bradley sat rigid in his new seat, arms folded, jaw tight. Every so often he glanced toward the front, and Kendra felt the weight of it even without turning. Zoe was typing furiously on her phone, occasionally raising it to check her video. Kendra had seen enough viral storms to know that once footage left the confines of a moment, it became something else entirely. It stopped belonging to the people in it. She reached for her briefcase and took out a pen, clicking it once before setting it down beside her. The motion was deliberate, a physical reminder to herself that she was here not only as a passenger but as a professional who understood the mechanics of public fallout. She wrote a single word at the top of a page framework. Maddie approached with a tray of drinks for another row, her eyes flicking to Kendra's open notebook. Kendra met her gaze, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition that the story was now bigger than either of them could contain. From the cockpit, the captain's voice returned. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been advised that weather over Portland continues to cause delays. We'll be in a holding pattern for the next 30 minutes. Thank you for your patience. The announcement was met with soft groans from around the cabin. Kendra knew delays bred restlessness, and restlessness made people bolder in their whispers. A man across the aisle leaned toward his seatmate. You see her, the one in 2A, CEO of something big. Heard she's taken the airline to court. Kendra didn't react outwardly, but the corner of her mind filed the comment away. She wondered how many more versions of the story were already forming in the cabin. Each one would spread, altered by perception, stripped of nuance. The turbulence began as a faint tremor beneath her feet, then deepened into a rolling sway that made cups rattle in holders. Maddie steadied herself against a seat back, scanning for passengers who might need reassurance. Kendra focused on her breathing. She had flown through worse, but turbulence had a way of amplifying the tension already present. Every dip and sway felt like another reminder of instability, not just in the air, but in the fragile balance of the situation she was in. Zoe leaned forward again. "It's everywhere now," she murmured. "3 news accounts already picked it up. Some are asking for statements. Tell them you can't speak for me," Kendra said softly. Zoe hesitated, then nodded. "Understood," from behind. Bradley's voice cut through the murmur. "Figures. Make a scene. Get famous." Several heads turned. The turbulence made the moment more charged, as if the air itself was pressing down. Kendra didn't turn to face him. Her voice was calm, even. "Standing up for yourself isn't making a scene. It's making a choice." Bradley muttered something under his breath, but the words were swallowed by another roll of turbulence. Maddie appeared quickly, placing a hand lightly on the seat in front of him. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to keep your comments to yourself for the remainder of the flight." Bradley leaned back, lips pressed into a thin line. The cabin settled again, though the hum of whispered conversation never fully stopped. Kendra returned to her notebook, drawing lines between words, mapping out points she would need to make in Portland. It was no longer just about this morning. It was about pattern, precedent, and what would happen if she let this pass without challenging it. She wrote another word, visibility. Her mind shifted to the people watching from outside this metal tube in the sky, the employees in her own company. The young professionals who looked to her as proof that success didn't require conforming to someone else's definition of who belonged. This wasn't a personal inconvenience. It was a public test. The 30 minutes stretched. The plane banked left, leveling again, a slow circle in the invisible holding pattern. Kendra used the time to rehearse answers in her head, the way she did before stepping onto a stage or into a negotiation. But unlike those controlled environments, this one was still volatile. Bradley was still 3 rows behind. Zoe was still streaming in quiet bursts, and the captain was likely still getting instructions from both ground control and corporate. When the intercom chimed again, it was Maddie's voice. "Ms. Hollis, Captain Travers has received clearance to proceed to Portland. We'll be landing in approximately 40 minutes. Upon arrival, you'll be met by an AeroVista representative at the gate." Zoe's eyebrows rose. "That sounds official." Kendra gave the faintest smile. "It is." The descent began not long after. The turbulence eased as they dropped below the thickest clouds, revealing slivers of the landscape below, rivers winding like silver threads, patches of forest, the blurred grid of suburbs leading toward the city. Kendra closed her notebook and returned it to the briefcase. She smoothed her coat over her lap and straightened in her seat. There was a shift that happened before moments like this, a quiet locking into place. Her breathing slowed, her shoulders settled. The captain made his final announcement, voice smoother now. "Flight attendants, prepare the cabin for landing." Maddie passed through one last time, her eyes lingering on Kendra for a beat longer than necessary. "Good luck," she whispered, almost inaudible. The wheels touched down with a thud that rippled through the cabin. Reverse thrusters roared, then eased as the plane slowed along the wet runway. Passengers exhaled collectively, the kind of release that comes with solid ground beneath them again. As they taxied toward the gate, Kendra's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and email from her assistant. Subject line board aware of incident urgent debrief upon arrival. She slipped the phone back into her pocket without opening it. She already knew what it would say. The seatbelt sign clicked off. Passengers stood, stretching, pulling down bags. The energy shifted again, from tense to impatient. Bradley remained seated, eyes fixed ahead, not meeting hers. Maddie appeared once more at Kendra's row. If you'll wait until the others have deplaned, the representative will meet you at the door. Kendra nodded, watching the slow parade of passengers file past. Some avoided eye contact. Others gave small, almost imperceptible nods. A few mouthed quiet words she couldn't hear over the shuffle of luggage and the hiss of the opening cabin door. When the aisle was clear, Maddie gestured for her to follow. Kendra rose, briefcase in hand, and stepped toward the front. The air from the jet bridge carried a faint scent of rain. At the door, a man in a tailored Navy suit stood waiting. His AeroVista ID badge caught the light. He extended a hand. "Ms. Hollis, I'm Daniel Carver, VP of Customer Relations. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us." Kendra met his handshake with steady pressure. "I wasn't given much choice." Daniel's smile didn't falter, but there was a flicker in his eyes, the look of someone who knew this conversation would not be simple. They stepped into the jet bridge together, the hum of the aircraft fading behind them. The next stage was about to begin. The jet bridge smelled faintly of rain and metal. Kendra's heels clicked against the ribbed flooring as she followed Daniel Carver toward the terminal. He carried himself like someone trained to contain crises. His stride measured, his voice low when he spoke. "There is a conference room just past security," he said, quiet and private. "I thought it would be best." Kendra kept her briefcase in her right hand, her posture upright. "And who will be in this room?" she asked. Daniel hesitated for the smallest fraction of a second. "Myself, a representative from operations, and a liaison from our corporate communications team. The CEO has requested to join by video." He gave her a practiced glance. "This is an opportunity to address what happened directly. An opportunity." Kendra had heard that word used to soften situations that were anything but. She didn't respond. Instead, she let the sound of her own footsteps be the answer for now. They passed through a side door near the end of the concourse. The noise of the terminal dimmed instantly. Daniel swiped a badge, and a small conference room opened to reveal a polished table, 3 chairs on each side, and a large monitor at one end. 2 people rose as they entered. A woman in her 40s with a badge reading Operations, Rhea Patel, and a man in his 30s with a slim laptop open. His badge labeled Corporate Communications, Evan Miles. Both smiled in the careful, measured way of people who know their expressions will be studied. Kendra took the seat at the head of the table without waiting to be directed. She set her briefcase beside her, folded her hands on the table, and looked straight at the monitor. The screen lit, showing the face of a man in his 50s, hair silver at the temples, expression fixed in polite seriousness. Victor Hallbrook, CEO of AeroVista Airlines. "Ms. Hollis," Hallbrook began, "I want to start by apologizing for the treatment you experienced today. This is not reflective of AeroVista's values or the service we strive to provide." Kendra held his gaze through the camera. And yet, it happened. In front of crew, in front of passengers, and now in front of thousands watching online. Hallbrook's expression didn't change. "I have been briefed on the situation. Our team will be conducting a full review. We would also like to discuss how we might make this right." "Make this right," Kendra repeated, her voice even. "For whom? For me? Or for the optics?" Evan from communications shifted in his seat, glancing at Daniel. Hallbrook exhaled slowly. "For everyone involved." We recognize that incidents like this have a wider impact, particularly when they involve a customer of your stature. That word stature landed heavier than Holbrook likely intended. Kendra leaned forward slightly. If my seat had been denied to someone without my title, without my resources, would we be having this conversation at all? Rhea Patel spoke for the first time. Ms. Hollis, I have worked for AeroVista for 12 years. I can tell you we address all customer complaints seriously. Kendra's eyes moved to her, and yet this wasn't addressed on the spot. I was removed from my seat because another passenger decided he had more right to it than I did. Your crew watched it happen. They acted in his favor. I want to understand why. Rhea looked momentarily caught, her professionalism holding her in place. Procedures for boarding disputes vary, she said carefully, but clearly, in this case, they were not applied appropriately. Kendra let the silence sit for a moment. I am not here to negotiate for a voucher or a first-class ticket on my next flight. I am here because what happened to me will happen to someone else tomorrow if nothing changes. Holbrook straightened. Then let's talk about change. What do you propose? She opened her briefcase, took out the notebook she had been writing in on the plane, and slid it toward the camera so Holbrook could see the page. A list of bullet points in neat, deliberate handwriting filled it. Mandatory anti-bias training for all frontline and gate staff, real-time reporting mechanisms for discriminatory incidents, a passenger bill of rights displayed on every boarding pass. Victor's eyebrows lifted slightly. You came prepared. Prepared is how you survive in rooms like this, Kendra said. Daniel glanced between them, sensing the weight of the moment. These are actionable items, he said, and frankly, overdue. Rhea nodded, her voice firmer now. Implementing something like this would require executive commitment, but it is possible. Holbrook sat back. I will review these personally. In the meantime, we would like to issue a public statement acknowledging our error and our commitment to improvement. We would also like your permission to mention your name in that context. Kendra considered. I am not lending my name to a promise you might not keep. Issue your statement. Leave me out of it until I see action. The room went still for a beat. Then Holbrook nodded. Fair. They spoke for another 20 minutes, outlining the process for review, the internal investigation, and the timeline for implementing changes. Kendra answered every question with measured clarity, refusing to be pulled into language that softened the severity of what had happened. When they finally stood, Daniel extended his hand again. Ms. Hollis, thank you for your time and your candor. She shook it briefly. This isn't over, Mr. Carver. As she stepped out of the conference room into the quieter side corridor, Zoe was leaning against the wall, phone still in hand. They let me wait out here, Zoe said. I wanted to make sure you were okay. Kendra gave a small nod. I'm fine, but this is going to move faster now. Zoe's eyes widened slightly. Do you want me to keep the video up for now? Kendra said. But be ready. The narrative will try to shift. They walked together toward the terminal exit, passing windows streaked with rain. Somewhere beyond the glass, the aircraft they had just left was being prepped for its next flight, its seats soon to be filled by people who might never know what had happened in 2A that morning. Kendra paused by the window for a moment, watching the crew load baggage. This was the part of air travel most passengers never thought about the hidden work. the systems humming beneath the surface, the human decisions that shaped every journey. She thought about how easily those decisions could tip toward fairness or prejudice, often in the span of seconds. As they resumed walking, her phone buzzed again. Another email, this one from her head of public affairs. Subject: incoming press inquiries. Please advise. Kendra slipped the phone into her coat pocket. The rain outside tapped softly against the glass, a quiet counterpoint to the rising noise she knew was building beyond the airport walls. She had 48 hours, maybe less, before the story reached its first fever pitch, and she intended to use every minute. By the time Kendra reached her hotel in downtown Portland, the rain had deepened into a steady curtain that blurred the street lights into halos. She checked in under her own name, ignoring the part of her mind that suggested she use an alias. It was already too late for that. Her name was trending. The room was on the 15th floor, with a view of the Willamette River winding like a black ribbon under the night sky. She set her briefcase on the desk and sat in the armchair by the window, the hum of the city below merging with the muffled thud of her own pulse. Her phone lit with notifications every few seconds. Mentions, tags, messages from friends, colleagues, journalists she hadn't spoken to in years. She turned it face down on the armrest, letting the screen go dark. The television was on in the background. A news anchor's voice carried across the room. In a developing story tonight, a passenger on an AeroVista Airlines flight claimed she was removed from her seat in business class in favor of another traveler. The incident, partially captured on video, has been viewed over 2 million times in the last 12 hours. The segment cut to the shaky phone footage from Zoe, the grainy image of Bradley standing in the aisle, his voice sharp, the tension in Maddie's posture as she tried to intervene. Then Kendra's calm but steady refusal to move. The reporter's voice overlaid the scene with commentary about race, privilege, and airline policies. Then came the split screen. On one side, the footage. On the other, Bradley Sloan in a neatly lit living room, wearing a button-down shirt and an expression designed to convey reasonableness. He told the interviewer, "I never intended for this to become a racial issue. I was simply trying to sit in the seat I believed I had paid for." Ms. Hollis escalated the situation unnecessarily. Kendra muted the television, leaning back in her chair. She recognized the tactic: soften your tone, couch your actions in misunderstanding, shift the frame so the real offense is the reaction to it. She had seen it play out in boardrooms, in negotiations, in op-eds dressed as apologies. Her laptop was open on the desk. She walked over, logged in, and pulled up her email. There were over 40 requests from news outlets for interviews. Her assistant had flagged 5 as worth considering. The rest she ignored. A message from her head of public affairs sat near the top. Kendra, CNN and NPR have both requested live interviews tomorrow morning. We recommend choosing one and setting the tone before other voices fill the space. She stared at the email, the cursor blinking beside the subject line. Setting the tone. That was the challenge. The story was already being shaped without her. The longer she waited, the harder it would be to redirect. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a name she recognized from her early career. Melanie Carter, now a senior producer at a major morning news show. The message was short. "I know you. I trust you. Come on air tomorrow and tell it your way." Kendra typed back, "Give me 1 hour." She closed the laptop and crossed to the minibar, pouring herself a glass of water. She drank slowly, thinking through the next 12 hours. She would need to be clear, specific, unflinching. The point wasn't to relive the confrontation in Seat 2A. The point was to connect it to a pattern people could no longer ignore. Her thoughts were interrupted by a call from Zoe. The younger woman's voice came through the speaker, breathless. "They're trying to take my video down. Some accounts say it's copyright infringement, others say it's misinformation." "Stay calm," Kendra said. "Keep a copy, multiple copies. If they take it down, we'll repost it through official channels." Zoe hesitated. "You think they're scared of it?" Kendra considered the question. "They're scared of what it makes visible." After the call ended, she stood by the window again. Across the river, the lights of the city glowed against the low clouds, somewhere out there. Bradley was likely reading his own messages, taking calls from people advising him how to come out of this unscathed. She imagined his version of the night, the calls to sympathetic contacts, the insistence that he had been misunderstood, the quiet suggestion that she was leveraging the incident for attention. That last one would be the most effective. It always was. Her phone chimed with a new notification, a trending hashtag, "Shaw Seat for Kendra." The top posts weren't just about her, they were full of stories from other travelers, women, people of color, disabled passengers describing moments when their presence had been questioned, their rights diminished, their dignity challenged in the narrow confines of an airplane cabin. She scrolled, reading the accounts. A mother asked to prove her toddler was hers. A man removed from a flight after a seatmate claimed to feel unsafe, despite no incident. A teenager separated from her brother because another passenger insisted they weren't family. This was bigger than one seat on one flight. The pattern was undeniable. Her assistant called just before midnight. "I've confirmed CNN for 8 a.m., he said. "Studio is 5 blocks from your hotel. They'll send a car." Kendra nodded to herself. "Understood. Try to get some sleep," he added. After the call, she turned off the television, silenced her phone, and sat in the dark for a while. The city outside was still moving cars sliding through wet streets, a train horn in the distance. The quiet inside the room was deceptive. She knew tomorrow would be louder than anything she'd faced in years. When she finally lay down, her mind didn't drift toward rest. It went back to the aisle of Flight AV 2415, the armrest under her hand, the sound of Bradley's voice, the way every eye in the cabin had turned toward her. She felt again the weight of deciding whether to stand or stay seated, the split-second calculation of dignity against disruption. She had stayed seated then. Tomorrow, she would stand. The car arrived at 7:20 sharp, a black sedan. Windows tinted just enough to blur the driver's outline. Kendra stepped out of the hotel lobby into the damp Portland morning. Her coat collar turned up against the drizzle. She carried no briefcase this time, only a leather-bound notebook and her phone, both tucked neatly into her bag. The driver greeted her by name, opened the rear door, and didn't speak again for the short ride. The streets were still waking up, shop windows lighting one by one, the smell of fresh coffee escaping from open cafe doors. Kendra watched the city blur past, centering herself in the silence. She knew these next 20 minutes would be dissected, replayed, clipped into sound bites that could either cut through the noise or be drowned by it. The CNN building was tucked into a block of glass and steel downtown. A producer met her in the lobby, her headset around her neck, eyes scanning a tablet. Ms. Hollis, thank you for coming. We'll take you straight to makeup, then into the green room. Inside the small, brightly lit studio, the air smelled faintly of hairspray and warm electronics. A stylist brushed a light powder over Kendra's forehead to reduce shine, combed a loose strand of hair into place. "You're a natural on camera," she said with a small smile. In the green room, a monitor played the live feed. The anchor, Jason Kirk, was teasing upcoming segments, a closer look at airline policies after a viral confrontation on Flight AV 2415. Joining us next, the passenger at the center of that incident. Kendra sipped water from a paper cup. She could feel her pulse quickening, but she didn't fight it. Nerves were energy, and energy could be directed. A floor manager appeared at the door. 2 minutes. The studio lights were warm on her face as she sat across from Jason. He greeted her quietly, then turned to face the camera as the red light blinked on. "Good morning, America. We're joined today by Kendra Hollis, CEO of Hollis Strategic Partners, who says she was removed from her business class seat last night to accommodate another passenger. Kendra, thank you for being here. Thank you for having me," she said, her voice steady. Jason leaned in slightly. "The video of this incident has been viewed millions of times. Can you walk us through what happened from your perspective?" She recounted the sequence calmly, without embellishment. Boarding in Dallas, taking her assigned seat, Bradley's arrival and his insistence, the crew's decision to move her despite her ticket. Jason nodded slowly. Some viewers might ask why not just take another seat and avoid the confrontation. "Because it wasn't about the seat," she replied. "It was about what it means when someone looks at you, decides you don't belong there, and others go along with it. If you don't stand your ground in that moment, the message is that they were right to treat you that way." The camera cut briefly to the footage, then back to Jason. Bradley Sloan, the other passenger, told us in an interview that he never intended to make this about race. He says it was a misunderstanding over seat assignments. Kendra met the lens directly. Intent does not erase impact. Whether or not he intended it, the outcome was the same. My presence was questioned. My rights as a paying passenger were ignored, and the decision favored the person who challenged me. Jason paused. "You're the CEO of a major firm. Do you think your professional status changes how people see this incident?" "If anything," she said, "it highlights that status isn't protection. If it can happen to me in broad daylight, on a full flight, imagine the people it happens to every day who don't have the platform to talk about it." In the control room, producers exchanged quick glances. The clarity of her answers was landing. Jason's final question was the one she had prepared for most. "What do you want to see happen as a result of this systemic change?" she said. "That means anti-bias training for airline staff, accountability mechanisms when discrimination occurs, and a clear passenger bill of rights. This isn't just an AeroVista problem. It's an industry problem, and it's a cultural problem." The red light on the camera went off. Jason thanked her again, and the floor manager ushered her toward the exit. In the hallway, the producer caught up to her. "That was powerful," she said. "You're going to see a reaction almost immediately." By the time Kendra was back in the sedan, her phone was vibrating with alerts. Clips from the interview were already circulating, hashtags multiplying, headlines using her words in bold type. Halfway to the hotel, her assistant called. "Bradley just went live on a podcast. He's calling you opportunistic." Says you're exploiting this for personal gain." Kendra exhaled through her nose. Predictable. He's also saying he never saw your boarding pass, that the crew told him the seat was his before he even spoke to you. "That's a lie," Kendra said flatly, "and it won't hold. At the hotel." She bypassed the lobby and went straight to her room. She opened her laptop and began drafting a statement, not just a rebuttal, but a reinforcement of her earlier points. Every sentence was deliberate, each one tying the incident back to the broader issue. She knew the fight wasn't for sympathy. It was for framing. By noon, her interview was the top story on multiple news sites. Bradley's podcast clip was also spreading, but the tone was different. Many commenters questioned his version, pointing out inconsistencies with the footage. Others were openly hostile toward him, calling out his attempt to redirect blame. Her inbox pinged again. This time, it was from a civil rights organization she respected. They wanted to support her publicly, offer legal counsel, and use the moment to push for federal guidelines on airline discrimination. She agreed to a call. As she spoke with their director, she felt the center of gravity shifting. This was no longer just about Flight AV 2415. It was about momentum and what could be built from it. That evening, a friend from New York texted a screenshot of a digital billboard in Times Square. It displayed the words, "Every passenger deserves a seat," with the hashtag, "A seat for Kendra," in bright white letters. She stared at the image for a long time, the hum of her laptop filling the quiet. The visibility was a double-edged blade, but she had no intention of letting go of the handle. Outside, the Portland rain showed no sign of stopping. On the 23rd floor of AeroVista's headquarters in Chicago, the boardroom smelled faintly of polished wood and burnt coffee. The long glass table gleamed under recessed lighting, surrounded by 12 high-backed leather chairs. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the lake glimmered cold and gray. Victor Halbrook, the CEO, stood at the head of the table, his tie loosened but his posture still commanding. He tapped a pen against a closed folder, eyes scanning the faces around him. "We're not here to debate whether this is a PR problem. It is. The question is how big it's going to get if we don't get ahead of it." Across from him, Daniel Carver, VP of Customer Relations, leaned forward. "It's already bigger than we can contain. The clip's been replayed on every major network, and her interview this morning was effective." Evan Miles, head of corporate communications, shifted in his seat. "Her framing is dangerous for us. She's not just making this about her. She's tying it to systemic discrimination in the airline industry. That invites regulators, lawsuits, the works." From the far end, a woman in a navy pantsuit spoke up. Rhea Patel, head of operations, kept her voice measured. "We could own this. Publicly acknowledge the incident, apologize, outline changes. It won't kill us to admit we handled it poorly." Victor's gaze snapped to her. "It will if it opens the door to every disgruntled passenger with a story to tell." Daniel shook his head. "That door is already open. Pretending otherwise makes us look arrogant and out of touch." The tension thickened. These were not people used to being challenged in public, let alone by a single passenger with a calm voice and a steady gaze. Victor turned to Evan. "What's Bradley Sloan's stance right now?" Evan grimaced. "He's doing interviews on fringe podcasts, trying to paint her as opportunistic, but he's inconsistent. He said 3 different things about whether he saw her boarding pass, so he's a liability." Victor said, Keep him talking to outlets that don't reach the mainstream. The more he contradicts himself, the easier it will be to dismiss him later." Rhea leaned forward. Dismissing him doesn't address what happened on that plane. Maddie made a judgment call. Owen backed it, and we reinforced it. We can't bury that under spin. Victor's jaw tightened. We'll address it in a controlled statement, but we are not letting her dictate our terms. The door opened, and an assistant stepped in, sliding a tablet toward Victor. "Sir, you need to see this." On the screen was a clip from a mid-afternoon rally in Portland. A small crowd had gathered outside AeroVista's downtown office there, holding signs "Respect Passengers' Rights and Bias," "Has No Altitude," in the center. Zoe Park Ortiz was speaking into a microphone, recounting the incident with the urgency of someone who had been there. Her voice carried over the wind. We saw it happen. We saw how quickly her seat was taken and how slowly her dignity was considered. Victor set the tablet down with a quiet thud. And now we have a witness with her own audience. Daniel spoke again, this time with a sharper edge. If we keep stonewalling, this becomes a case study in corporate deflection. You might win the news cycle, but you'll lose the court of public opinion and maybe the actual courts, Rhea added. And if we lose the public, we lose trust. Without trust, every boarding call becomes a potential incident. Victor didn't answer right away. He was staring out the window. The Chicago skyline reflected faintly in the glass. "Finally," he said, "draft 2 statements, one that admits limited fault and one that pushes back. I'll decide which to release tomorrow." When the meeting broke, Daniel caught up with Rhea in the hallway. He lowered his voice. "If he chooses the pushback statement, this will explode." Rhea nodded. "Then we make sure he understands exactly what he's gambling with. Across the country, in her hotel room." Kendra sat at the small desk with her notebook open. Her phone lay nearby, buzzing every few minutes with new messages, most of which she ignored. She was working through a list of people she needed to call, interviews she would accept, lines she wanted to deliver that would land not just in ears but in memory. Zoe had stopped by earlier, leaving a USB drive with her original video file and backup copies. They had talked briefly about the rally, Zoe's voice still electric from speaking in front of the crowd. "People are ready to listen," she'd said. "Don't let them turn this into a he said, she said." Now, as evening deepened outside her window, Kendra replayed the CNN interview in her head. The questions had been fair, but she knew fairness was fleeting in this kind of spotlight. She had to assume the next round would be sharper, more adversarial. Her phone lit with an unfamiliar number. She almost ignored it, then answered. "Ms. Hollis, this is a reporter from the Tribune. Off the record, I think you should know there's division inside AeroVista. Some executives want to settle and apologize. Others want to fight you." Kendra listened, saying nothing, until the reporter added, "One source says the CEO is leaning toward the latter." "Thank you for telling me," she said finally. After she hung up, she sat back, weighing the information. Division inside the company could be an advantage, but only if she pushed in the right place at the right time. She picked up her pen and wrote 3 words in her notebook: pressure, wedge, timing. That night, back in Chicago. Victor Hallbrook stood alone in his office. The lights of the city shimmered below, the air faintly metallic from the building's ventilation system. He poured himself 2 fingers of scotch and leaned against the desk. He had built his career on controlling markets, narratives, and people. This was different. This was a story that refused to stay in the hands of those who thought they owned it. Somewhere deep down, he knew Rhea and Daniel were right, but admitting that would mean admitting he had mishandled it from the start, and Victor Halbrook had never been in the business of admitting fault. The morning air in Portland carried a damp chill that clung to skin and clothes alike. Outside the downtown Civic Plaza, rows of metal chairs had been set up facing a small platform draped in a deep blue backdrop. Microphones jutted forward from the podium like eager antennae, each one labeled with the logo of a different network. Kendra stood just inside the glass doors of the building behind the stage, watching through the window as people filled the chairs, a mixture of reporters, activists, and ordinary citizens in rain jackets and hoodies crowded in, some holding handmade signs dignity at 30,000 feet, no more excuses, and simply Kendra. Her assistant, a compact man named Jonah with sharp eyes and a knack for logistics, stepped up beside her. "We're live in 8 minutes. After your statement, we'll take no more than 3 questions. Keep control." "I intend to," Kendra said, smoothing the lapel of her charcoal blazer. She had chosen the outfit deliberately strong lines, understated color, no distractions. Jonah lowered his voice. "AeroVista's been calling outlets since dawn. They're pushing the line that you're orchestrating this for political leverage." Kendra's expression didn't change. "Then, let's make sure my words don't leave them room to twist. At 10 Zora sharp." She stepped onto the platform. The low murmur of the crowd faded into an expectant hush. She looked over the sea of faces, letting the moment settle before she spoke. "3 days ago," she began, "I boarded Flight AV 2415 in Dallas, bound for Portland, with a valid ticket for business class seat 2A. I was told to move. Not because the seat was unavailable, not because there was a safety issue, but because another passenger, a white man, insisted it was his, and the airline agreed." Her voice carried easily over the plaza's portable speakers. "I refused, because it wasn't about comfort or convenience. It was about the principle that every passenger, regardless of race, gender, or title, is entitled to the seat they paid for and the respect they deserve." Cameras clicked in rapid bursts. Kendra kept her gaze steady. "This is not just my story. In the days since, I've heard from travelers across the country who've been questioned, displaced, or disrespected in similar ways. What happened to me is part of a pattern, one that will continue unless the industry takes responsibility." She outlined 3 demands: comprehensive anti-bias training for all airline employees, a transparent passenger bill of rights, and a federal review of discriminatory incidents on commercial flights. "I am not here to destroy AeroVista Airlines," she concluded. "I'm here to insist that they and every carrier do better. For all of us." The applause began with a few claps, then spread until the plaza filled with sound. She took 3 questions as planned, one about her personal reaction in the moment, one about her proposed reforms, and one about whether she would take legal action. To the last, she answered, "I'm exploring every option to ensure change, not just for me, but for everyone this has happened to." When she stepped away from the podium, Jonah met her with a tight nod. That was bulletproof. In Chicago, the AeroVista boardroom was once again full. Victor Halbrook stood at the head of the table, holding a printed transcript of Kendra's remarks. "She's not backing down," Evan Miles said, flipping through the same transcript on his tablet, and she's smart, no personal attacks, just clear demands. That makes her harder to discredit. Victor tossed the papers onto the table. Then we stop trying to discredit her. We fight her on terms we can control, legal and contractual. Daniel Carver's jaw tightened. If you go legal, you're escalating this into a prolonged battle that keeps us in the headlines for months. Victor met his eyes evenly. Better that than admitting fault and inviting every grievance into our inbox. We draw the line here. Rhea Patel spoke up. And what happens when more witnesses come forward? When employees start leaking details from that flight? You can't litigate your way out of a cultural problem. Victor's voice cooled. I can, and I will. We've weathered worse storms. Daniel leaned forward. Not like this. This isn't a mechanical failure or a scheduling error. This is about people's dignity, and the public is watching how we handle it in real time. But Victor had already turned toward Evan. Draft the legal notice. We're contesting her account and defending our crew's decision as operational necessity. Across the table, Rhea and Daniel exchanged a glance. The fracture between them and the CEO had widened to a chasm. Back in Portland, Kendra was finishing an interview with a local station when Jonah slipped her a folded piece of paper. She read it quickly, a message from a contact in AeroVista's mid-level management. They're moving toward a legal counterattack, Jonah said under his breath. Kendra folded the paper again, her mind already shifting gears. A counterattack meant they wanted her on the defensive. The best move would be to stay offensive to keep the public conversation on her terms. She called Zoe, who picked up on the second ring. I need the full rally footage from yesterday. Unedited, Kendra said. We're going to post it ourselves with a statement tying it to the demands I outlined today. Zoe didn't hesitate. I'll bring it over within the hour. By evening, the video was live on multiple platforms, paired with Kendra's call for reform. Within 3 hours, it had over 500,000 views and was being shared by high-profile figures in politics, media, and civil rights advocacy. She sat back from her laptop, the glow of the screen painting her face in soft light. She knew Victor was likely in some high-rise office, reading the same headlines, seeing the same wave build. The difference was, she was ready to ride it. That night, Victor stood in his penthouse, looking out at the Chicago skyline. The city was a glittering map of lights, but his mind was far from serene. His phone rang a call from an old friend on another airline's board. She's not going away. Vic, the voice on the other end said, and every day this drags on, she gains ground. Be careful you're not remembered as the CEO who fought a losing battle against the wrong person. Victor didn't answer right away. He set the phone down, poured himself a drink, and stared at his reflection in the dark glass. Tomorrow, the legal notice would be filed, and tomorrow, he suspected, Kendra Hollis would find a way to turn it into fuel. The letter arrived just after sunrise. It was hand-delivered to the front desk of Kendra's hotel, sealed in a thick cream envelope embossed with the AeroVista crest. Jonah brought it up to her room, his expression grim. It's official, he said, placing it on the desk, their legal notice. Kendra slid it open with the edge of a pen cap, pulling out several crisp pages. The language was cold, almost surgical. AeroVista Airlines formally disputes your characterization of events on Flight AV 2415. The decision to relocate you was an operational necessity based on seating protocol and passenger safety considerations. Public statements to the contrary are defamatory. She read it twice, her jaw tightening only slightly. They want me to either retract or face litigation. Jonah hovered near the window. They're betting you'll back down to avoid a drawn-out legal fight. I've faced worse fights, she said quietly, but they've just given me an opening that same morning in Chicago. Victor Hallbrook sat in his office with a steaming mug of black coffee, scrolling through the first wave of coverage about the legal notice. The headlines were a mix, some echoing AeroVista's framing, others questioning whether the airline was trying to intimidate a whistleblower. Evan Miles entered without knocking. "You might want to see this," he said, dropping a thin manila folder on Victor's desk. Inside were printed screenshots of an anonymous social media account called AeroLeaks. The posts were time-stamped less than an hour ago. Post 1 internal memo from October 3rd flight attendant protocols revised to allow seat reassignment for passenger comfort without managerial review. Post 2, screenshot of a crew group chat from Flight AV 2415 message from Maddie Keene to Owen Travers. "This guy's making a scene about his seat. Might just be easier to move her." Post 3, training manual excerpt. No mention of operational necessity in seating policy. Victor flipped through them slowly. "Where did this come from?" Evan's voice was low. "We don't know yet. Could be a current employee. Could be someone you laid off last quarter." Victor's eyes hardened. "Find them. Now." By noon, the AeroLeaks posts had been shared thousands of times. Reporters began calling Kendra for comment, but she waited. Timing mattered more than speed. At 1:00 p.m., she released a short video from her hotel room, holding the printed legal notice in one hand and her phone in the other. "AeroVista says this was about safety," she said, her tone calm but unmistakably firm. "But here's what's coming out from inside their own company. These are their words, not mine." She held up the printed screenshots from AeroLeaks, letting the camera linger long enough for the text to be legible. "If they want to take this to court, we'll bring the truth with us." The video went viral within hours. Legal analysts on cable news debated whether the leaked documents were admissible evidence. Civil rights advocates praised her for refusing to be silenced. In the boardroom, the atmosphere was electric with unease. Rhea Patel sat stiffly in her chair as Victor paced. "We're not confirming the authenticity of anything," Victor said. "If we acknowledge these leaks, we legitimize them. Daniel Carver's patience had worn thin. They're already legitimized. The media's running with them, and every denial makes us look more guilty." Evan added, "We've got journalists contacting rank-and-file crew members directly. If one of them confirms even part of these messages, the story's out of our hands." Victor stopped pacing. "We hold the line. We stick to our statement." Rhea spoke up. "Victor, this isn't just about optics. If those memos are real, they point to a culture problem, and that culture starts here." The room went still. Victor's eyes narrowed. "Watch yourself." "Rhea," but she didn't flinch. "I am." "Are you?" That evening, Kendra was invited onto a primetime news panel. She knew this was her chance to cement the narrative. The host introduced her alongside two other guests, a former FAA investigator and a consumer rights attorney. The first question was direct. "Ms. Hollis, AeroVista says they acted for safety reasons. How do you respond?" She took a measured breath. Safety is not a cover for discrimination. If safety had been the issue, they would have explained it on the spot. not 3 days later in a legal notice. She gestured slightly toward the camera. Now, we have leaked internal documents that contradict their official statement. If they want to claim operational necessity, they should produce the specific safety policy they acted under. They haven't, because it doesn't exist. The attorney nodded in agreement. The FAA investigator added that passenger comfort was not, and had never been, a valid safety justification. When the segment ended, Jonah met her in the green room with a quiet grin. That landed exactly how you needed it to. Across the country, in a quiet coffee shop far from either Portland or Chicago. A young woman sat with a laptop open to the AeroLeaks account. She typed out another post, hesitated, then hit send. Post 4, Flight AV 2415 Post-Incident Report. No mention of passenger safety concerns. States reassignment was made to expedite boarding and avoid confrontation. Within minutes, the new leak was circulating online. A well-known investigative journalist, quote, tweeted it if authentic. This undercuts AeroVista's entire legal claim. At midnight, Victor's phone buzzed on his nightstand. It was a text from a private number. "Stop digging for me. I'm not the only one with receipts." He stared at it for a long moment before typing back, "Who is this?" No reply came. He set the phone down, the city lights blinking faintly through the curtains. For the first time in his career, Victor Holbrook wondered if control was no longer his to keep. In her hotel room, Kendra sat at the desk, a single lamp casting warm light over her notebook. She wrote out the key points she would hit tomorrow, tie the leaks to her demands, keep the focus on systemic reform, and prepare for the possibility that AeroVista would double down again. She paused, pen hovering above the page, and thought of her father's words. Stillness is a kind of power. She smiled faintly. Stillness didn't mean inaction. It meant choosing your moment and tomorrow. She would choose hers. By Thursday morning, Portland was buzzing with the kind of media energy usually reserved for political conventions and celebrity trials. Satellite news trucks lined the curb outside Kendra's hotel. Cameramen crouched in the lobby, hoping for a candid shot. And across the street, a small crowd of supporters stood with coffee cups and hand-painted signs, chanting softly against the rain. Jonah had been up since 5 a.m., fielding calls from national outlets and trying to screen out the noise. "We've got the New York Sentinel wanting to sit down," he told Kendra as she poured tea from the hotel's stainless steel pot. "And 3 morning shows. Everyone wants to be the one to get your side before the shareholder meeting next week." Kendra sipped her tea slowly. "We don't flood the market. We pick the moments, and we make sure every moment counts." Jonah handed her his phone. "Then you're going to want to see this." On the screen was a live interview with a woman in her 40s, wearing a navy scarf and speaking from what looked like her kitchen. The Chiron read, "Former AeroVista flight attendant goes public. My name is Janine Lowell," the woman said, her voice steady. "I worked for AeroVista for 12 years. I can confirm that seating reassignments have been made for reasons that had nothing to do with safety. I've seen it happen to women of color more than once. We were told to keep the cabin calm, and sometimes that meant moving the person least likely to cause trouble." Kendra's eyes narrowed. This was no anonymous leak. This was a face and a name. Within an hour, 2 more ex-employees had stepped forward, one a gate agent from Denver, another a flight supervisor from Miami. Each told similar stories. In Chicago, The AeroVista headquarters was in crisis mode. The 13th floor conference room was packed with lawyers, PR specialists, and senior executives. Evan Miles looked exhausted. We can't just ignore these people. Victor, they're credible. They've got years with the company, and the media is eating it up. Victor slammed his hand on the table. We don't validate liars by responding to them. Rhea Patel's voice cut in. They're not all ex-employees. Victor, 2 current crew members are talking to journalists right now. If they go on record, you can't dismiss this as a grudge match. The general counsel, a pale man in a gray suit, leaned forward. If current employees go public, it shifts the legal landscape. That becomes potential evidence in any trial, and it could invite federal oversight. Daniel Carver said, "It's already inviting oversight. I got a call from the DOT this morning. They're monitoring developments." Victor glared at him. "We will handle the DOT. We will handle the press, and we will crush this woman in court." Rhea shook her head. "You're not hearing me. This isn't just about Kendra anymore. The narrative has moved. This is about the culture at AeroVista, and the more you fight it, the more you prove it." That afternoon, Kendra met Janine in a quiet cafe 3 blocks from the hotel. Janine was shorter than she'd appeared on TV, with warm brown eyes and a quick, nervous smile. "I wasn't sure if I should reach out," Janine admitted, stirring her coffee. "But when I saw the legal notice they sent you, I thought this is the same playbook they've been using for years. And if someone doesn't break it, they'll just keep going." Kendra nodded slowly. "You're taking a risk. They'll try to come after you." Janine shrugged. "They already tried once. When I pushed back on moving a black couple from their seats in first class, they cut my hours until I quit. I'm not afraid of them anymore. By the time they left the cafe, Jonah had arranged for a professional camera crew to film Janine's full account. It would be part of a longer video. Kendra's team was preparing a video timed to release 2 days before the AeroVista shareholder meeting, late that night in a dimly lit apartment in Seattle. Zoe Park-Ortiz uploaded the final cut of the rally footage, the press conference, and Janine's testimony into a single, seamless piece. It was sharp, emotional, and punctuated by on-screen text calling for passengers to share their own stories under the hashtag #SeatForAll. She hit publish at 11:47 p.m. By morning, the hashtag was trending in multiple cities. Stories poured in from passengers across the country, some recent, some decades old. Photos of boarding passes, blurry cabin shots, and heartfelt paragraphs filled timelines. One post from a black woman in Atlanta read, "Paid for seat 4C last year. Told to move for balance. White man got my seat. Didn't want to cause a scene. Wish I had now." Another from a Latina traveler in Los Angeles said, "Happened to me in 2018 on AeroVista. Gate agent told me they were adjusting for comfort." Guess whose comfort? By midday, Victor was staring at a real-time social media dashboard in the comms war room. The Tucker Seat for All posts were overwhelming AeroVista's own marketing feed. Every attempt to post about unrelated promotions was instantly drowned out by hundreds of comments referencing the scandal. Evan tried to spin it. We could acknowledge the hashtag and redirect it toward our commitment to safety and service. Victor shot him a look. "No. That gives it oxygen. We're not feeding this fire, but the fire didn't need feeding. It was burning on its own now." In Portland, Kendra and Jonah reviewed the final details for their pre-meeting strategy. "They'll expect you to show up at the shareholder meeting itself," Jonah said. Do you want to? Yes, Kendra said simply. If they want to make decisions about the future of their company while ignoring the voices they've harmed, they can do it to my face. Jonah grinned faintly. Then we make sure your entrance is unforgettable. That evening, Rhea sat alone in her office, staring at a half-written resignation letter. She had joined AeroVista believing she could push it toward better practices. Now, she wasn't sure if staying was helping or enabling. Her phone buzzed with a message from a restricted number. If you want to leave with your integrity, now's the time. She didn't reply, but she didn't close the resignation draft either. The next morning, the New York Sentinel ran a front-page headline, "Whistleblowers Say AeroVista Targets Passengers of Color." The story featured Janine's account, the leaked memos, and 3 new interviews with current employees speaking anonymously. Victor read it over breakfast, the paper trembling slightly in his hands. For the first time, he felt something he hadn't felt since this began, not anger, not defiance, but a creeping sense of inevitability. Across the country, Kendra read the same headline and knew they were approaching the moment her father had always talked about, the point where stillness breaks, and you move. The rain in Portland came in thin, slanting sheets the morning of the AeroVista shareholder meeting. Outside the convention center, a crowd gathered behind metal barricades, holding umbrellas and cardboard signs. Some read, "Seat for all" in bold black letters. Others bore messages like, "Dignity has no class and passengers, not problems." News crews lined the steps, their camera lenses glistening with raindrops. Kendra stepped out of the black sedan with Jonah at her side. She wore a simple charcoal suit, her hair pulled back in a low twist, and carried nothing but a slim leather folio. The crowd erupted into cheers and camera shutters. She didn't wave, didn't pause. She simply walked forward with a calm, deliberate stride. Inside, the conference hall buzzed with tension. Hundreds of shareholders milled about under chandeliers, the hum of small talk masking a current of anticipation. At the far end, a raised dais held the AeroVista Board of Directors. Victor Holbrook sat in the center, flanked by Rhea Patel and the other senior executives. When the meeting opened, Victor went first. His voice, usually smooth, carried a faint edge. AeroVista has faced an unprecedented storm of misinformation in recent weeks, he began. We remain committed to safety, service, and shareholder value. We will not be distracted by false narratives designed to undermine this company. A few polite claps followed, but murmurs rippled through the room. The floor opened for shareholder questions. Jonah had already secured Kendra a spot at the microphone. When her turn came, the hum quieted to near silence. Kendra Hollis, CEO of Hollis Strategic Partners, passenger on Flight AV 2415, she said clearly. "Mr. Holbrook, you've called my account a false narrative. You've claimed the decision to move me was about safety. Yet leaked documents, crew messages, and whistleblower testimony all point to a different truth, a culture that normalizes discrimination under the guise of customer comfort." "Which is it?" Victor leaned forward, his expression carefully neutral. "Ms. Hollis, I will not litigate specific passenger experiences in this forum. The matter is subject to legal review." Kendra didn't look away. "Then I will, because this is not just about me. This is about every passenger who's been treated as a problem to be managed instead of a person to be respected. This is about the people who work for you who've said on record that they were told to prioritize avoiding conflict over doing what's right." She opened her folio and held up a single sheet. The post-incident report from Flight AV 2415 leaked 2 weeks earlier. Nowhere in this document is there a safety concern. Nowhere. It says the reassignment was made to expedite boarding and avoid confrontation. That is not safety. That is prejudice dressed as efficiency. Gasps and murmurs swept the room. Cameras clicked furiously. Victor's jaw tightened. We do not confirm the authenticity of stolen internal documents. Kendra stepped closer to the mic. Whether you confirm them or not, the culture they reveal is one you built, and culture can be changed, but only if the people in charge are willing to lead differently or step aside for those who will. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Rhea Patel shifted in her seat. Slowly, she reached for her microphone. I've worked in operations at AeroVista for 15 years. I have seen the policies in those leaks. They exist, and they have been used in ways that violate the dignity of our passengers. Ms. Hollis is telling the truth. The room erupted, some in applause, some in stunned whispers. Victor turned toward Rhea, his voice cold. Rhea, this is neither the time nor the place. This is exactly the time and place. Rhea interrupted. These shareholders deserve to know what kind of company they own, and the public deserves to know what kind of company they're trusting with their lives and money. Other voices joined in, not just shareholders, but employees who had quietly slipped into the meeting. A young pilot stood to speak about watching a family be moved from premium seats for balance. A veteran gate agent described being reprimanded for refusing to downgrade a frequent flyer. The board chair tried to gavel the meeting into order, but the moment had shifted. Control was no longer in Victor's hands. Kendra waited for the noise to subside, then said, "You can change this now. You can adopt the AeroVista Respect Standard, a binding policy that prohibits seat reassignments for any reason other than genuine safety. You can commit to independent oversight and training led by people who understand bias, not just people who manage optics. Or you can keep pretending this isn't happening until the courts, the regulators, and the passengers make the choice for you." The applause this time was thunderous, echoing under the chandeliers. Victor's face was unreadable, but the other board members were exchanging glances, some concerned, others calculating. After a long pause, the board chair announced, "We will take this proposal under immediate review." Kendra nodded once, stepped back from the microphone, and walked toward the exit. The crowd parted around her. Outside, the rain had slowed to a mist. The crowd beyond the barricades was larger now, their cheers rolling like surf. Zoe Park-Ortiz was there, live streaming as Kendra emerged. Janine Lowell stood beside her, holding one end of a banner that read, "Every seat, every person, respected." Kendra paused at the top of the steps, letting the sound wash over her. Jonah leaned in and said quietly, "Whatever happens in that boardroom now, they can't put this back in the box." She smiled faintly. Exactly. For a moment, she thought of her father's words, "Stillness is a kind of power." She had waited, chosen her moment, and moved. And now, it was their turn to move. The cameras followed her as she stepped down into the crowd, shaking hands, listening, promising to keep going. In the distance, the rain-swollen Willamette River slid under the bridges, steady and unstoppable. What began as a single act of arrogance in a narrow airplane aisle became a national conversation about justice, respect, and the quiet strength it takes to confront what's wrong even when the odds are stacked against you. Kendra's story isn't just hers. It's every traveler who has been made to feel small, every professional whose worth was questioned, every person who's been told, without words, "You don't belong here." It's a reminder that dignity is not a privilege, it's a right, and that prejudice, no matter how politely dressed, is still prejudice. We end this journey with gratitude for the voices who spoke up, for the witnesses who refused to look away, and for the countless passengers who shared their own truths. And we carry forward the challenge to treat every seat as a seat for all. If this story moved, you share it. If it made you think, discuss it. And if you want to be here for the next story that deserves to be heard, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell, because the fight for respect is far from over.